Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a fascinating and highly structured look at the biblical spirit world. We're going to strip away the myths and the pop culture tropes to see what the source material actually says.
So let's kick things off with a pretty foundational question. We hear about heaven, angels, and the supernatural all the time, right? But what actually is the spirit world? And more importantly, does it even affect your everyday life? Well, understanding this unseen realm could completely change the way you view the world around you.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll look at the unseen dimension, who inhabits the spirit world, what happens when these two worlds collide, rethinking spiritual warfare, and finally, the ultimate spiritual truth.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the unseen dimension. Most of us spend our entire lives hyper-focused strictly on the physical world, the stuff we can see, touch, measure, the stuff that's easy to explain. But this framework suggests our physical world is really just one layer of reality. It's like a giant puzzle, and we're only looking at half the pieces. The spirit world is basically defined as an unseen dimension of reality that exists just beyond what our human eyes can normally pick up. And hey, just because something is invisible definitely doesn't automatically mean it's imaginary.
Actually, what's really fascinating here is how this concept perfectly mirrors invisible realities we already accept every single day. Think about it for a second. You can't see gravity, right? But it absolutely anchors you to the floor and affects literally everything around you. You can't see radio waves, but they are constantly transmitting information and music through the air every single second. The physical stuff is tangible, sure, but these invisible forces are just as impactful. This framework basically argues that the spirit world operates the exact same way, completely unseen, but constantly affecting us.
Moving on to part two, inhabitants of the spirit world.
So, who actually lives in this unseen space? Well, the text breaks it down into four distinct categories. First up is God, positioned as the supreme eternal creator of all things, both visible and invisible. Then we've got angels. Now, importantly, these are created spiritual servants and messengers. They are not all powerful beings meant to be worshipped. Third on the list are fallen beings, which are basically rebellious forces that act as agents of deception. And finally, humans, which I know might sound a little surprising at first, but it's true. Humans aren't just physical creatures. We aren't just flesh and bone. Our deep thoughts, our complex consciousness, our constant search for purpose, the text points to all of this as evidence of a massive spiritual capacity. The only reason we aren't walking around constantly seeing the spirit world isn't because it's missing, it's because our physical senses act kind of like a filter. They naturally restrict us so we can function primarily in the physical realm. We are literally only seeing a slice of the whole pie. Which brings us to part three, when two worlds collide. So how exactly do these visible and invisible realms rub up against each other on a random Tuesday? The text maps out an interconnected sequence. It usually starts with prayer, and we're not talking about a one-way wish list to Santa Claus here, but rather a way to align with the unseen, which then affects the physical world. This invisible practice sparks unseen faith. That faith then directly influences the very real physical choices and decisions you make. And ultimately, those deep, unseen spiritual convictions end up physically shaping your everyday human behavior. Now, let's be real for a second. It is incredibly easy to over-spiritualize absolutely everything, but here is the reality check. Not every challenge you face is a spiritual attack, and not every bizarre coincidence is some profound divine sign. The text makes a crucial point here. We need to approach any unusual experience with a heavy dose of wisdom, humility, and discernment. Meaningful experiences absolutely do happen, for sure. But a grounded approach, one that prioritizes established truth over just chasing the next supernatural thrill, is highly recommended. Let's shift gears to part four, rethinking spiritual warfare. Okay, when you hear the phrase spiritual warfare, your mind probably instantly jumps to Hollywood blockbusters, right? Exorcisms, dramatic showdowns, flashy supernatural signs. But this framework argues that all of that is a massive distraction. The practical reality is actually so much quieter. It's the internal, everyday battle between truth and deception. It's choosing faith over fear and prioritizing obedience over compromise when nobody is watching. According to the source, the most intense spiritual battles aren't happening in cinematic, dramatic events. They are fought right between our ears, in the human mind and heart, every single day. It's at those quiet crossroads where we make our mundane choices. We are constantly deciding what we're going to believe and whether we'll walk in faith or just cave to despair. Honestly, it's a completely different, way more practical paradigm of spiritual conflict. And that brings us to our final section, part 5,
the ultimate spiritual truth. But before we get to that ultimate truth, we gotta clear away the clutter. The absolute biggest mistake people make, according to the text, is treating the spirit world like it's some kind of fascinating escape room puzzle to be solved. The text is super clear here. It is absolutely not about gaining magical power. It's not about chasing ecstatic, supernatural experiences, hunting for secret knowledge, or obsessively hyperfixating on the unseen.
Well, if it's not about mystery, what on earth is it about? The final truth here is that it is entirely about relationship. The greatest revelation in this text isn't the mere fact that angels or demons exist. No, it's about a creator who desires a grounded, restorative connection with humanity. God is presented as being infinitely greater than any mystery or any spiritual force. Everything else in that unseen realm, it's completely secondary to that relationship.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to chew on as you go about your day. If you were to shift your focus away from chasing all those supernatural mysteries, and instead just focused on building a quiet, grounded spiritual foundation, how would that change your daily perspective? It's a pretty powerful paradigm shift, isn't it? One that can totally move us away from fear and right into a space of practical wisdom. Thanks so much for exploring this unseen dimension with me today.